Hello and welcome to Composer's Journey from Inspiration to Creation. My name's Dylan Townley. I'm a musician and composer. I work mainly in theatre, but I also work with an orchestra called Bath Philharmonia. Through working with Bath Philharmonia, I met our composer for this series, Aaron Buckley-Mantell. And Aaron and I have been working together for over a year now, and Aaron has been kind enough to share with me a piece he's been working on, Flight of the Seeds, and it's the genesis and inspiration behind Flight of the Seeds that we're going to talk about in this first episode, and in future episodes we will start to talk about the creative process, how we go from that initial flash of inspiration into a fully realized orchestral score. So, Aaron, I will hand over to you to tell us a bit more about you and your background and your work.
Hello, my name's Aaron, and thank you for having me. I am a composer and an arranger. I have done recently a lot of arrangement projects for Bath Philharmonia, and from that was asked if I would write a 5-minute piece of music for the orchestra, which I obviously said yes to. I would love to do that, and this is my journey, I suppose, as I create this project. The piece is already finished, so we're flashing back to it and looking back at it, and I recorded a voice memo of myself when I first had the idea. I think I was riding my bike home from work, and I just had this idea because I was very much thinking, if I want to write a piece of music, what's the music about? Because my background in music mainly comes from film, so I've done lots of film projects, whether they're short films. I've also done one feature film as well, and the thing from those projects is you're very much working to you're responding to something that's already there, so your music is meant to amplify what's happening already, and the story's kind of already is laid out before you, so the music naturally has a structure to it before you've even begun, and it naturally has a theme to it and a purpose, whereas I was trying to write a piece of music that didn't have any of that beforehand, so you're very much just, it's a blank piece of paper, what's it about? And that for me was my sort of starting point of why I recorded this voice memo. I wanted to, once I had the idea, I wanted to just capture it before it disappeared so I could musically explore it later on, because the idea wasn't necessarily a solid musical idea where there was notes here, there's themes there. It was just like, this is the type of story that I want to tell with the music, and then I can explore those avenues later on.
So paint us the scene a little bit more, Aaron. You're riding your bike. Where are you? Do you see or hear or feel something? Does it just flash into your brain? What's that first moment of inspiration?
I think it is, just kind of came to me where I wanted to tell the story about a seed from falling off a tree and landing on the ground, and I flashed back to thinking about seeds as a child. We had in our garden lots of sycamore seeds on the ground, which are the helicopter seeds, and that's the seed that I wanted to tell the story of. And I don't necessarily know why that was specifically it. I think, sometimes there's a lot of classical pieces that are about nature. I mean, obviously the Four Seasons comes to mind, but I just felt like nature for me was a strong place to start, and it kind of felt as though lots of the kind of orchestral textures and patterns and stuff that I've been playing with through doing the various arranging projects over the last couple of years would lend itself really well to that theme of nature. And I think actually in some ways some of those projects were about nature itself, and so that's kind of felt as though I'd already built this connection with that theme, so it felt nice to go and explore it by myself in some ways.
So it's a coming together of some very deep childhood memories with a bit more recent kind of some techniques and themes you've been exploring in your work, and you preserved this moment of inspiration in a voice note.
I did, yeah. Should I play it now?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. This is my idea for a piece called Seed, or Seedling, something like that. Seed. The idea is that there is a seed attached to a glorious, magnificent tree, and it just tells the journey of that seed from being attached to the tree to landing on the ground. That happens because at the beginning there is a gentle breeze. This is played by the strings, probably the upper strings. The upper strings is the gentle breeze. The lower strings is more of a gale force, like ooh. It's the gust of wind rather than the whisper of the breeze. So the beginning opens with the whisper of the breeze. The strings are playing very maybe some trills, maybe a little bit of tremolo, and then they sort of lift off when the breeze gets going. Then they sort of lift off into these beautiful runs. Think about the opening of Harry Potter. Think about the Matrix runs, those types of things. You know, sort of gentle, very gentle. And then the breeze sort of bends to pick up. So maybe the strings, there's more strings in there. You know, it gets a bit thicker. I'm thinking throughout, as the wind gets thicker, maybe the strings sort of divisi in their different sections in order to create this luscious, thick texture. And then the woodwind and the brass and the percussion sort of is the little extra bits on top. But the woodwind and the brass represent the seed. So maybe the seed, I'm thinking it's one of those helicopters, so the ones with the two things, and they just rotate beautifully. In my mind, I can picture looking up, sort of a camera looking up, and the seed sort of helicoptering round downwards towards you, sort of in slow motion, with other ones dancing around them beautifully. And that's the word, they're dancing towards the floor. And it's this circular motion as well, I think. So maybe when the seed is still attached, it doesn't, when it cuts loose, there's this sort of boom. You know, the flute's really dancing there. Maybe it's doing it's probably tongued, I reckon, because that's, and maybe the brass might mark that, some sort of trumpet line to showcase that it's been detached from the tree. Before they get there, maybe the woodwind is sort of simmering as the seed is loosening from the tree, and they're simmering. Maybe it's like some nice trills in there, in lovely trills, lovely different textures, and this beautiful dancing melody kind of starts off, I think, in the flutes, and then it kind of cascades down through the wind section. So it goes to the flutes, maybe the oboes take over, and think about the kind of Ravel type textures. Maybe the Ladronette Ravel movement from Mother Goose is a good example of these different combinations of woodwind and other instruments. Because he's got some lovely dancing piccolo lines in there. So maybe it does start with a piccolo. And so yeah, you've got these lovely dancing melodies, they come down, but then also the woodwind kind of represent other things, that other helicopter seeds that are also around. So imagine the wood flute comes in, the oboes come in, the clarinets come in, and then as the bassoons come in, the bassoons are sort of the seed as it's lower down, so the melody gets passed down the registers until it lands on the ground with a bum. And as the melodies cascade down through the registers, then gradually the upper registers will cut out, so that we just have the focus on the ground. And probably as this happens, the wind is also dying down. I think throughout there's going to be moments when the wind rushes and it gushes and it takes the seed on this journey as it helicopters up and it helicopters down. It's basically dancing around in the breeze, dancing around in the wind. Think about the paper bag scene in American Beauty. Watch them watch these clips in slow motion. Like, think about, maybe look up on YouTube clips of seeds dancing, clips of seeds falling in slow motion, clips of seeds in the wind, that type of stuff. And the seed kind of, as it comes down to the ground, and the wind is sort of settling around it. And it probably, I think it can just end in this nice little, and maybe there's a snapping sound. Okay, it's from the pizzicato, snap back, Bartok pizzicato, as the seed comes off the branch, maybe in the bass section. And another percussion sound as well, like was the whip sound. That'd be a good one. And then snap. That's the flute doing that kind of line. And I think also maybe the flute should play a gentle solo theme, a gentle shortened version of the seed theme at the very beginning by themselves. It's a possibility. So it can open with a solo flute, similar to how Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun starts with a solo flute. So maybe that's how it can start. And I think then it, and then the wind will go sort of whisper. Think about, the types of string movements you've been doing with the young carer stuff. Think about that. And the seed in flight has a majestic quality to it. Think about singing trumpets and maybe not singing, like long singing trumpet notes. And maybe they're playing the chords like... They're paired with other instruments as well. I think that's pretty good. There you go.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I loved hearing that voice note, and I loved, if you'll forgive the unintended pun, the seed of this idea. Well, one thing I noticed throughout that voice note is the way that you seem to be feeling the orchestral textures as you talk about them. It sounds like you're tasting the orchestral textures, or kind of savoring each change and beat, and you take the time to allow one texture and idea to arrive, and then to let it kind of run its course, and you describe it in words, but you also you hum, and you kind of imitate or kind of simulate some of those sounds of the orchestra. When you're in that state of the idea arriving to you, how does that feel to have a whole orchestra kind of and all of the different textures and ideas kind of flowing through your mind and your voice in succession?
It's quite exciting. I think from the very beginning of the voice note, it sounded a little bit like I'm out of breath. I must have cycled home really fast, and I was like, I've got to record this voice memo. But no, I get what you mean. It is kind of like the way I picture it or describe it is that I don't necessarily hear the exact sound, but it's like it's slightly out of focus, but you know what it is roughly, but you're just trying to grasp it, and you haven't quite. Grasping it means you've got the finished product, but you're just sort of going, is that it? And you're just sort of combing in this misty view of something, and that misty view is what the bass players are doing in there, and you go, well, they're playing something that sounds like this, but you don't necessarily know what it sounds like. I think the way you described it is what it feels like. That is a much better way of describing it, actually. I'm getting excited now talking about it, and I've already written the piece. It is definitely those different types of feelings that you get from the piece. I've talked about it being majestic and putting trumpets in, and I'd actually completely forgotten about that, but but that is in the end piece, I think, which is really nice. Yeah.
It does. It sounds really exciting, and yeah, as you say, it's sort of it begins arriving out of breath and almost kind of in the middle of something, sort of saying, "Oh, I have to capture this now," like while it's happening, while it's in my mind.
I think those little bits I sing as well, like they're not actually anything like is in the finished piece. They're not the melodies that will show up. It's just, the strings will move in this fashion, and then there's lots of bits of me just singing on there. I never sing for anyone really. So, you got a unique view of how my mind works.
Yes, yeah, an exclusive insight into the way that these ideas arrive. It's a real joy to hear that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, in terms of the kinds of ideas that are arriving first, as you say, on the melodic level, there are melodic ideas and kind of gestures in there, but they're not at a level of specificity where you could immediately notate them. They're kind of shapes and they're arcs, kind of journeys from one point, one section to another. And so from a melodic point of view, it's sort of there are the beginnings of things there, but they are still maybe slightly in that shroud, in that mist where they're going to become more specified later on. Whereas some of the texture ideas feel really sharply defined from the beginning. And I was noting as well how some of your references for texture were very specific, and also like they were specific to pieces. You're referencing Ravel, Mother Goose, and D'après-midi by Debussy. It was interesting to me that you were referencing to French composers, very close to each other in time, very influenced by each other, perhaps influenced in a slightly rivalrous way at some points as well, and how French music of that time really foregrounds texture. I was thinking about the Clouds, Les Nuages by Debussy as well, and how there are perhaps parallels there of tone painting, sound painting, a natural phenomenon. Are Debussy and Ravel influences of yours in general, or did they arrive with this piece as useful models?
Ravel definitely is a massive influence. He's probably my favorite classical composer. I've sat down and I've got a copy of his, was it the Mother Goose Suite, so sort of 5 pieces from the larger ballet, and I've sat down and studied those pieces. Similarly, I've studied L'Après-midi from Debussy as well. Although I think when I was first learning about music composition, that was one of the early pieces which I sat down and sort of listened through. And I think naturally because if you enjoy listening to those pieces, which I obviously do, then you naturally absorb, what they're doing. Because you go, oh, I really liked how they did that, and you think maybe I can try that out in, a piece that I'm doing, or even not if you're trying out that exact thing, you're just like, oh, I really liked how they did that, and maybe I could do something similar over here with these instruments, or you just look at different combinations that they're doing and different movements and like brush strokes, I suppose. I suppose in a similar way to how like a painter might study another artist and go, well, I really like their brush strokes, look really cool. The actual thing that they're painting is completely different, but their artistic technique, that's the thing that you're trying to look at. And I really enjoy that as well, not just listening to the music, but delving into like how has this composer created and built this piece of music. And sculpted it, I suppose. I also talked about John Williams and the Matrix music, and again, like those Matrix music. When I was a teenager, loved listening to those scores. They were so cool, but they're completely quite wild and very not very necessarily tuneful, I suppose. Which John Williams is very tuneful. So yeah, I've mostly listened to film music as orchestral music, more so than classical music. But yeah, Ravel is definitely a classical composer which I have listened to. I wouldn't necessarily say I've listened to his catalogue extensively, but the pieces I have listened to, I really have listened to, and just have really delved into them. I think another piece I looked at was the Rhapsody Espanol. And there's some amazing woodwind stuff that's going on in there that I was like, oh, he's just layering, and it also happens in the Mother Goose Suite. He's just like layering them on top of each other, and they're just sort of weaving in and out, and it's just so cool. And I just wanted to create something similar in a certain portion of the Flight of the Seeds. Does have something similar to that effect, really.
Absolutely. The cinematic influence is very strong in the piece, and it's also, the references were wide as well. Yeah, Harry Potter and The Matrix, and also American Beauty, Bag in the Wind scene. It feels like there's a cinematic imagination in play there, because you're starting from quite a cinematic image. I mean, I can kind of picture that tracking shot of the seed kind of quivering on the branch, detaching in a breeze, and following that journey down. And I suppose you're also thinking about perhaps slowing down time, tracking that journey over 6 minutes, because the initial idea is in the voice note is the seed falling from branch to ground. I wonder if actually that journey has lengthened during the development of the piece, because I feel I can hear the seed almost being carried on multiple currents and going on a slightly longer journey than from branch to ground. Or I can hear it as a very slowed down, compressed journey from branch to ground. But I think there are also there's so much rise and fall throughout the piece that for the seed, maybe we end up taking it on a slightly longer journey, and it's almost extending that initial image that you had of the seed detaching and falling more directly.
Yes, definitely an extension. I mean, falling from off the tree down to the ground would be quite a short piece, I think. But I found, for me, the start of the piece was about creating that, the sound of the gentle breeze, because that for me was the carrying mechanism for the seeds. And I ended up trying to find, I mentioned in the thing about trying to find on YouTube like clips of seeds falling in slow motion. It's really hard to find the shots that you're looking at that were in my head, and they're just people filming them on their phones, and it's just a bunch of seeds just going, and that's kind of it. Which was not very inspirational. But I did manage to find like an old David Attenborough documentary where it was a short clip called something like Seed Aviation, and this short clip was about 2-3 minutes long, and in it basically had pretty much what I was imagining, and it told the story not of just one seed, so not just the helicopter seed, but it also had another seed before it. Can't remember the name of it, but it looks like a feather. It almost looks like an aeroplane made of feathers, like a little glider. And the video actually starts, the first half of the video is about that seed. And so I basically kind of scored that video clip basically as a way of, trying to capture the story. And which is why you have these dramatic sort of rises and falls when the seed, it doesn't necessarily snap from the tree. You don't really get that moment. But it does, fall out of the tree. And because the first one, the seed is not necessarily attached in the same way that sycamore seed would be, but it just gently falls, and it's like an aeroplane just flying around and gliding, and it takes ages to get to the ground. But obviously, because someone's made a film out of it, they've extended it as well, so they're probably not just filming it once, they're filming it several times. They've stitched it together into this epic sequence. So I was like, well, that's what I need to do. So I kind of wrote that, and then when you probably about halfway through, when you get up to these in the textures in the piece, it's loads of patterns going on over the top of each other. That's when the helicopter seeds come in, and it's not just one, it's all of them coming in. It's like, and they're all just happening all at the same time, which is why for me it was really important to create these textures that overlap, that were not exactly the same, that kind of create this sort of like a chopper type sound, but not in like a traditional kind of way, just in an effect where it sounded like there was loads of churning kind of stuff going on, and it's these woodwind just going goo, 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 and they're playing two patterns which are sort of slightly misaligned, and the emphasis is in different places. So, and that happens then over the top of like the bass, and then later on you have this zoom in moment where in the music, you have the harp playing beautifully and you have the flute line playing, and it's quite sort of slow and subtle and delicate. And that was when this video went from suddenly being in real time to being slow motion, and that's when you saw these amazing images of like the seed just rotating in slow motion. And obviously it wasn't just one seed, they showed lots of different varieties and different shapes and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's that journey from tree to the ground, it's in there, but it is massively extended. And I mean, the music is longer than that video clip. The video clip just sort of was my framework basically for the middle chunk of that music. But the beginning and the ending, I ran out of video, so I was like, well, I'm gonna have to take it somewhere myself now. So yeah.
So your work in film and scoring really comes into play there as well, and you've had this initial image and this inspiration, and then you've sought out footage to score to and to develop those initial ideas in response to. It sounds like an interesting development from being a composer for film to using film to nurture and to grow your own music from. You're going from having to score in quite a strict way, and the film and the edit kind of being in charge of that, to instead the film being in service to music. And as you say, also when you either run out of film or there is something you want to write before the footage starts, you've got that freedom to develop your ideas in either direction, really.
Yeah, I found I didn't want to score the video. I wanted to use the video to help me write the music. And so I didn't like import it into my audio software and strictly score it beat per beat type thing. I just kind of kept it open in another window on my internet browser somewhere else, and every now and then I just flick back at it and go, what's happening there? It'd be like, oh, the next 5 to 10 seconds are of the seed doing this. So I was like, okay, well, I want to try and sonically capture that movement that it's making. And I did make sure before I even clicked play on the first time I watched the video, I was like, I have to mute the video, because I don't care what audio is going on. Like, I don't want to be influenced by whatever the video already has sort of the sound of. I just wanted to have the movements of the seeds represented by the image, and for me to then be able to go from there by myself, really.
Yes, not wanting to be unduly influenced by the BBC Natural History Unit kind of take,
yeah, exactly.
take or what. And just the other thing I'd note from there is, from that initial note to the piece that we have now, we've gone from seed to seeds, plural. And I do hear that in the music. You're talking about the overlapping and interplay of lines, particularly in the woodwinds. And we'll get onto this in more detail in subsequent episodes, but I feel we start with a seed, maybe at the start of this piece, and then it becomes a flurry, a crowd, a melee of seeds kind of floating across the wind, carried on different currents as the writing becomes more and more polyphonic. When did that occur? When did we go from seed to seeds? Is it later in the process, or was it quite early on? You were sort of, or was it early on?
I think it was later in the process. I mean, before I even started writing anything about the seed, for me it was capturing that sound of the wind, and once I'd got that was my foundation for the music, and I wanted to do different things with that. So you've got like a gentle breeze, you've got gusts of wind, and capturing those sort of textures, I suppose, and capturing those sounds was the starting point. And I didn't even really necessarily think about the seeds until later on, once I'd found that bedrock. Once I did have that, though, then yeah, it was just a seed, and particularly it wasn't even the seed I intended to write about, which was this helicopter one. It was this sort of feather-shaped one instead. And from there, it was when the video that I was using as sort of inspiration, then they kind of come up against this, one seed coming down, and then there's another one coming down, and there's another one, and then another, and then suddenly they're all. It's like like when it starts to rain, you get like 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, and then it's pouring, and that's kind of when that happened. I was like, oh, okay, all the seeds are coming now, and I think I didn't really change the name of the piece until probably later on, but it was probably about halfway through the actual piece itself when that moment of there's more than one seed now kind of happened, which I think, to be honest, was kind of inevitable. I think in my mind I'd had the idea that it was this journey of this seed, but ultimately in the background you might have a close-up of that one particular seed, but in the background there's other stuff going on as well. There's other seeds falling. It's not just this one seed.
Well, I think that is a very appropriate image to close this first episode. A single seed, be it the seed of an idea of musical inspiration, turning into a polyphonic, multi-textured piece with lots of different lines running through it, and also the physical image of the seed detaching from the tree and then being joined by a flurry of other seeds kind of fluttering towards the ground. So that's a beautiful image of a creative process. It can start from that one image, that one flash of inspiration, but once it's picked up by the breeze and starts tumbling around, then you can get a whole myriad of related ideas kind of fluttering and flowing along in its wake. So thank you so much, Aaron, for sharing with us the inspiration and the early concepts and genesis of Flight of the Seeds. This is Composer's Journey from Inspiration to Creation, and in the next episode we'll be talking about the first notes, putting pen to paper and creating the first musical ideas and setting down what the orchestra actually play as flowing from and resulting from this first inspiration. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you.